It was a quiet Thursday evening when I first noticed them. 5 children, dressed in strange animatronic costumes, were playing in the park near my apartment complex. At first glance, their colorful cartoonish suits seemed like something out of a quirky festival or a cosplay gathering. But something about them was off. Their movements were unnervingly synchronized, and their silence was deafening. I watched from my window, curiosity mixed with an inexplicable unease. The children never spoke to each other, never laughed or shouted like kids usually do. They simply moved in unison, their heads jerking mechanically from side to side, as if scanning the area. I thought perhaps it was some odd performance, and I'd missed the announcement. The next evening, they were there again, in the same spot, performing the same eerie routine. This time, I decided to go down and take a closer look. I walked into the park, the chill in the air biting against my skin. As I approached, the children stopped abruptly, their heads snapping toward me in perfect synchronization. My breath caught in my throat. Their eyes, or rather the hollow spaces where eyes should have been in their masks, seemed to pierce right through me. "Hi there," I said, forcing a smile. "What's this for? A school project?" No response. They just stood there, motionless, staring. The silence stretched on, heavy and oppressive. I felt a cold sweat form on my brow. "All right, well, have fun," I muttered, backing away slowly. As soon as I turned my back, I heard the faint creak of their costumes. I glanced over my shoulder and saw them walking away, their mechanical movements perfectly in sync. It was unsettling, but I shrugged it off. Kids could be weird sometimes, I thought. The following week, the sightings became more frequent. The children appeared not just in the park, but outside the grocery store, near the library, and even in the alley behind my building, always in the same animatronic costumes, always silent. Their presence was starting to feel invasive, like they were watching me. One night, as I was returning home from work, I spotted them again. They were standing under the streetlight at the corner of my block, their heads tilted upward, as if staring at the bulb. The light flickered ominously. As I walked past, I could feel their gaze follow me, even though their heads didn't move. I quickened my pace, my heart pounding. By the time I reached my apartment, I was shaking. I locked the door behind me, double-checking it before drawing the curtains. I told myself I was being paranoid, but the unease gnawed at me, refusing to be ignored. The next morning, I decided to talk to the building's superintendent, Mr. Harris. He was an older man with a kind smile, always willing to lend an ear. "Hey, Mr. Harris," I began hesitantly, "have you noticed those kids in the costumes? They've been hanging around a lot lately." Mr. Harris frowned, rubbing his chin. "Kids? What kids? You haven't seen them? They're in these weird animatronic suits, always together, never talking. It's strange." He shook his head. "Haven't seen a thing, son. Maybe it's just some prank." His words did little to ease my nerves. That night, I stayed up late, watching from my window. Sure enough, around midnight, they appeared again, standing in the park. This time, they were closer. Their faces, if I could call them, throttled it up toward my window. I froze, my heart hammering against my ribs. The following days blurred into a haze of paranoia. The children seemed to be everywhere I went. I started seeing their reflections in store windows, their shadows in alleyways. Once, I even thought I heard faint, mechanical laughter behind me. But when I turned around, the street was empty. One evening, I decided to confront them. I couldn't live like this anymore, constantly on edge. Armed with a flashlight and my phone, I headed to the park where I had seen them most often. The air was thick with tension as I approached the spot. Sure enough, they were there, standing in a circle under the dim glow of a streetlight. "Who are you?" I demanded, my voice shaking. "What do you want?" For the first time, one of them moved forward. The animatronic suit creaked, the sound grating against my ears. The child stopped a few feet away from me, tilting its head as if studying me. Then, in a voice that was hollow and distorted, it spoke. "You shouldn't have noticed us." My blood ran cold. Before I could react, the others closed in, their movements swift and unnatural. I stumbled backward, dropping my flashlight. The light flickered as it hit the ground, casting eerie shadows that seemed to dance around me. "Stay away!" I shouted, but my voice was drowned out by the mechanical whirring and clicks that emanated from their suits. I turned and ran, my heart pounding in my ears. The sound of their footsteps, synchronized and relentless, followed me. I burst into my apartment building, slamming the door shut behind me, but I knew it wasn't over. That night, I barely slept, every creak and groan of the building making me jump. When dawn finally broke, I decided to leave the city. Whatever was happening, I couldn't stay here anymore. I packed my belongings and rented a moving truck, leaving behind the life I had built. As I drove out of the city, I glanced in the rearview mirror, half expecting to see them standing in the distance. But the road was empty. Weeks passed, and I started to feel a semblance of normalcy in my new town. The memory of the children in the animatronic costumes began to fade, becoming a surreal, almost dreamlike recollection. But deep down, I knew they were still out there. One night, as I was unpacking the last of my boxes, I heard a faint mechanical whirring outside my window. My blood turned to ice as I pulled back the curtain. There, under the streetlight, stood 5 figures, their hollow eyes fixed on me. They had found me.